Sir, with your permission, can we start in 2 minutes?
Yes, please. Yes, ma'am.
Sir, your video, could you please on your video?
Yes, yes. Sure.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Sir, with your permission, I would like to start with today's session.
Yes, madam.
Thank you, sir. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I, on behalf of Legal Expatiate, welcome you all to our fourth 4 days online certificate course on facets of drafting civil matters. Forum of research scholars, advocates, academicians, and students, Legal Expatiate organizes webinars, competitions, debates, certificate courses, etc. And we are delighted to welcome you all to our first session of 4 day certificate course on facets of drafting civil matters, for which we have 286 registered participants, including advocates, students, and academicians from all over India. Participants of this course would be privileged to groom themselves in major aspects of drafting in civil areas from best renowned advocates from major areas across India, for which we are honored to have Advocate Sudhakar Avhad sir, renowned advocate practicing at District and Sessions Court, Pune. Sir has completed LLB, bagging second position in Pune University. He has also been awarded Tulpule Gold Medal for his outstanding performance in law examinations. Having been awarded PhD in law, Sir started practicing as a lawyer in 1977. During his 41 years period of advocacy, Sir has conducted civil, criminal, revenue, land acquisition, and environmental matters. In addition to this, Sir has been teaching law since 1977, having more than 250 judges in Maharashtra state being students of Sir's renowned coaching classes for judicial examinations. Known for determination, hard work, and skills of teaching, Sir has participated in number of national and international conferences, has been member of Land Titling Committee by Government of Maharashtra, and has delivered lectures at almost all district court bar associations in Maharashtra state. Moreover, Sir has written couple of books. Some of them are Draftsman, Law of Notices, Judicial Services Examination, etc. Sir has also acted as chairman of Bar Council of Maharashtra and Goa, legal advisor of Pune Municipal Corporation, and many other state and national level organizations. Sir, we are honored to have you with us today. I request Honorable Awad sir to address the participants on drafting of specific performance suits. Just housekeeping before the session. All the attendees are requested to mute themselves unless asked by the speaker. Questions, if any, shall be put in chat box and participants on YouTube shall put the questions, if any, in the comment box. Over to you, sir. Please do the honor, sir.
Thank you, Anaga madam. Thank you very much. I'm really honored to be with you all this evening. I'm thankful to the organizers for giving me this opportunity of having a dialogue with you all friends. I have been assigned my today's session with a subject, the specific performance suits, notices, pleadings, that is plain and written statement and evidence. In this process, to begin with, I would like to highlight the points to be discussed in this our dialogue, friends. First, I will just remind you, for them who are practicing in the courts, that every now and then, when we are conducting suits or such appeals, etc., regarding specific performance suits, then it is always said that it is an equitable relief. And hence, we will discuss in the first instance why it is said to be an equitable relief. Then we will go to the Act of 1877. Then we will look into the provisions of the Act of 1963. And then we look into the amendment of 2018. And after discussing contents of these laws as are relevant for our today's purpose, we will look into the concept of the pleadings, the plaint, the written statement, and evidence in respect of suits based on specific performance. So also, we'll discuss the elements to be discussed in respect of the plaint and written statement and important case law, so that even new entrants in the legal profession will be benefited thereby. Friends, it is rather difficult to address a galaxy of the audience wherein there are mixed persons from students, junior lawyers, and law teachers. Usually, we are required to address either students in law colleges or lawyers at the bar associations or teachers. However, this being the mixed galaxy of the audience, I'll be to some extent going to theoretical as well as practical aspect of today's session. Thank you. So to begin with, why it is said to be an equitable relief? Every now and then in the courts, we speak of this today's subject as based on equity, and also the references to English law are permitted in Indian courts with reference to the suits based on specific relief. So as to understand this subject, why at all this law is said to be equitable or based on equity, friends, we have to go to the 12th century position in the United Kingdom. During 12th century, in the United Kingdom, the position was, as some of you must have read about it, there was a legal system in England, then called as, legal system was called as the common law court, the common law justice, and the common law. In short, there was a common law system which was working in England, that was made applicable in England during or in the beginning of 12th century. When this system was going on, the system, friends, was based on the Latin principle of ubi remedium ibi jus. You must have studied this principle. It is just to refresh your elementary memory in this behalf. The principle of ubi remedium ibi jus meant that where there is a remedy, there is a right. So law in England during 12th century was, if there is a remedy available to you, then only right was recognized. In the absence of a remedy, right was not recognized as per the English system. This issue as to right and remedy relationship was therefore in the table of writs. As per the Common Law of England, it was in short a table of remedies provided, and therefore any litigant, any aggrieved person, whenever he wanted to have the relief in the court, he has to first satisfy the court that there is a remedy available in the law books. If there was no remedy available in the law books, remedy was denied to him, right was not recognized, and court was helpless. However, in such cases wherein, for the technical reason, justice was denied to such litigants, the litigants they approached the King of England. The King of England then was said to be the fountain of justice. Any thirsty person who was thirsty of or having thirst of knowledge of justice, he could approach the king, and the King of England will do justice to such persons. Such persons could do justice. Such persons could do justice in such cases, and when justice was done, king decided such cases as per his conscience. The cases went to the king for want of remedy in the court, or the common law court was increasing, and because of that, there was increasing number of cases before the king. The King of England assigned this function to his chief minister called as Lord Chancellor. His chief minister, usually the bishop, he was then called as Lord Chancellor. Lord Chancellor, sitting in the chancery, started deciding cases wherein common law court failed to provide for a remedy. And therefore, principle of the Court of Equity, the principle of Lord Chancellor sitting in the chancery was simply ubi just ubi remedium. And therefore, it was not the remedy which was important, but that was the consequence wherein wherever there is a right, remedy must follow. Exactly opposite principle was based on the conscience of the king and then conscience of the Lord Chancellor. These principle of conscience, these elements of conscience, these various decisions delivered by the Court of Equity or Lord Chancellor in the run of the time came to be reduced into writing, and then it became law of equity. Now, there were two parallel systems. One was common law administered by common law courts. Second was equity, such equity that was administered by Lord Chancellor. Such principles which were formulated and crystallized in the common law court, which were based on remedial principles, came to be transformed into right-based principles. Right-based principles, therefore, was the basis of law of equity. And therefore, in case of this law of equity provided for principles guiding the courts whenever there was no written law in this behalf. These principles, in the run of the time, became equity. And this equity had three parts. Whenever there was no remedy in common law, such a remedy was provided by equity court. When there was a proper remedy, but there was inadequacy in the remedy, that inadequacy was done away by of equity. And thirdly, there was a remedy, there was adequate remedy, but there was no proper procedure, then such proper procedure was provided by law of equity. Hence, to conclude the first point, the equity had threefold jurisdiction. Whenever there was no remedy in common law, remedy was provided. This was exclusive jurisdiction of equity. Secondly, whenever there was remedy but there was inadequate remedy, proper and adequate remedy was provided by equity, that came to be known as concurrent jurisdiction. And thirdly, whenever there was a remedy but there was no proper procedure was provided by the equity, that came to be known as auxiliary jurisdiction. Our today's subject comes in between. In case of exclusive jurisdiction, it was law of trust. in respect of concurrent jurisdiction, there was specific relief, specific performance, and law of injunctions. Therefore, friends, our today's subject is with reference to concurrent jurisdiction of equity. Yes, every now and then, when we speak of equity courts, then you will find the principles are to be followed in India are based on law of equity as provided in England. Therefore, whenever issue comes as to any case based on equity, any case based on specific performance, the law as stated, law as understood, law as decided by the English courts and English judges is acceptable or is to be addressed to the Indian courts. Friends, this is the first aspect in respect of the basis of equity. Hence, it is said that in respect of specific performance, this is an equitable remedy. Therefore, whenever this issue arises in the courts of law, every now and then we argue in respect of the principles that it is the equitable principle. Here, at this juncture, I will conclude with one case. It has been held by the Honorable Supreme Court in the year 1972, that is the case of Hungerford Investment Trust Limited versus Haridas Mundra. In case of this case, which is reported in AIR 1972 Supreme Court, page number 1826, it has been held by the Apex Court in respect of cases based on equity, cases based on specific performance, the cases decided by the English courts are irrelevant. And therefore, friends, whenever there are suits based on specific relief, specific performance, we in the courts argue, or usually the judges ask us for our pleadings, whether it is equitable relief, whether persons they are coming with clean hands, and conduct of the parties becomes of utmost important with reference to this historical antecedent of the nature of law of equity and specific performance. This was just beginning of the today's session with reference to why it is equitable relief and why it is relevant. Based on this, let us friend come to today's subject proper. That is the specific performance suits and the specific relief act application. In respect of specific performance suits, friends, let us first try to understand where from the specific performance or specific performance rule is applicable. The Specific Relief Act, as is applicable today, has been amended in the year 2018. However, before this amendment of 2018, there had been twofold legislation in this behalf. The first ever legislation in India, that was pre-independence legislation as to specific relief, was in respect of the Specific Relief Act of 1877. Then there was the Specific Relief Act of 1963, and then came the amendment of 2018. Let us go to this hierarchy first. As you being student of law, the new entrant in the legal profession, it is better that we understand the history of the legislation. Let us try to understand where from this law came. And most of you know from the legal history or legal and constitutional history of India that within the British Empire, before independence, there was the first law commission appointed, and that was in the year 1833. By this law commission, there was the report submitted to the Parliament of England that the English laws shall be made applicable to the Indian subject, British subject in India. It was Lord Macaulay who is notorious for his suggestions so as to make Indian citizenry subjected to the English laws. It all started with Macaulay's report based on Law Commission of 1833. Then there was second Law Commission of 1853. By virtue of this second Law Commission of 1853, what was done was they provided that there shall be substantive civil law made applicable to Indian people. And third was the consequence, especially in respect of the Third Law Commission during British period of 1861. And this Third Law Commission of 1861 submitted its fourth report to the Parliament of England. And by virtue of that fourth report submitted by the Third Law Commission of 1861, now there was a recommendation by the parliamentarians for drafting and enacting of specific relief act for India. And that was the British time, the British Parliament enacted law, that was the Specific Relief Act of 1877. That is how, for the first time, the law came to be enacted for Indians in the form of the Specific Relief Act of 1877. We know there was the Indian Contract Act of 1872, and now there was the supplementary law enacted in the year 1877. That is the first act in respect of the specific relief. Then this law, which is drafted by draftsman Whiteley Stokes, it is tailored on, rather it is borrowed from the New York Civil Code of 1862. By adopting the basic principles from the New York Civil Code of 1862, this law has been enacted by the Britishers for us. Especially in this law, the principles of equity as were administered in England were incorporated therein, and they made applicable to Indian citizenry. This is the consequence in respect of the early beginning of this law. Let us come to the Act of 1963. This Act of 1877, which was pre-independence law that was made applicable to Indian subcontinent. However, in the run of the time, after India getting independence, there was need felt to change this law. And the need felt to change this law by substitution of, by amending the law in this behalf. Law was not amended by minor amendments, but law was substituted. The Specific Relief Act of 1877 came to be substituted by the Specific Relief Act of 1963. And this 1963 legislation came into force from 1st March 1964. From 1st March 1964, the law of India underwent a radical change. Law came to be changed. And therefore, especially these specific performance suits, they are now regulated by the provisions of 1963 legislation. But its specific performance, it has been stated, it has been explained by Lord Husbury's Law of England. In Lord Husbury's Law of England, in his 4th edition, volume number 44, the author says, the great compilation says that the remedy by specific performance is given by the court to enforce against defendant the duty of doing what he agreed by contract to do. A plaintiff may therefore obtain judgment for specific performance even though there has been, in the strict sense, been any default by the defendant. Thus, for issuance of the writ, for granting a remedy, friends, what was required was equity in the favor of the plaintiff. Thereafter, after enacting the Act of 1963, there are 3 parts of Act of 1963. Our today's session is not relating to entire Specific Relief Act, but we are concentrating on assigned subject as to suits based on specific performance only. If we look into the book of Specific Relief Act of 1963, which came into force from 1st March 1964, you'll find that there are 3 parts and there are 8 chapters and there are 42 sections. In the first part, that is called as a preliminary part, there are only 4 sections. Then the second part relates to various forms of relief that are provided in section 5 to section 35. And then comes the last part, which relates to the preventive relief in the form of injunctions as provided in sections 36 to section 42. Therefore, of this entire scope of the Specific Relief Act, comprising of 42 sections, we are not concerned with entire syllabus. We are concerned with only one piece of legislation. Part second, comprising of sections 5 to section 35, provide for various forms of relief. That provides for recovery of possession. That provides, secondly, as to the specific performance. That provides for partition. That provides for cancellation of documents. That provides for rectification of documents. That provides for rescission of documents, or rescission of contracts. And lastly, that provides for declaratory suits or declaratory decrees provided in respect of section 34 and section 35. Of these various code relief, we are relating ourselves only to the second part of relief, specific performance, as is stated in section 9 to section 25. And therefore, our today's part relates to the second part of Specific Relief Act, comprising of sections 9 to section 25 of this Act. Because of this scope of this law, we shall be discussing and canvassing these various provisions. Before we enter into the Specific Relief Act proper on these premises, on this background, on this backdrop of the discussion, let us see in this behalf the scope of this today's subject, today's law. Today's subject and today's law is to be found limitations in section 3 and section 4. The first limitation is relationship between Indian Contract Act of 1872 and today's subject, that is the Act of 1963 as amended in 2018. In the first instance, this act relates to, as provided in section 4, specific relief to be granted only for the purpose of enforcing individual civil rights. Look, the beauty is provided here. What is the scope of this law? This act is provided only for the purpose of enforcing individual civil right, not merely the penal law. And therefore, this purpose is limited, and that is individual civil rights. This is the operation of this act. And secondly, that relates to that this shall not deprive of any person of any right to relief of specific performance which may have under the contract. So, as far as the relationship between contract and this law is concerned, the provisions of the Contract Act shall have the superiority. Still, the provisions of the Contract Act are enforceable, and this is just a supplementary law. And secondly, that is provided that this act means the Specific Relief Act of 1963 shall not affect the operation of the provisions of the Indian Registration Act of 1908 as to documents. So, what are the limitations? You shall understand before we start our discussion that this today's law, this 1963 legislation is subjected to two limitations. First, it is subjected to the law of contract principles. Secondly, this is merely to enforce the individual civil rights, not penal laws. Therefore, this is the scope of the today's subject, especially in respect of the specific performance suits. Based on these, friends, we will go to the next part, and that is in respect of the earlier law. As to suits we are coming to, contents of the plaint and the contents of the return statement, while sending a notice, while drafting a plaint, while drafting a return statement, what precautions we lawyers shall take or the beginners in law shall take, that we will discuss now. Especially in this behalf, we shall make provision as to the earlier law as it stood before amendment. Friends, you will find by virtue of the 2018 amendment, there is a sea change made, there is an ocean change made, there is a major changes effected with reference to application and enforcement of the Act of 1963. Especially in respect of this, there is a discretion of the The discretion of the court was provided as per the old law, that is law of 1963 in section 20 thereof. As we have said, as per the English law, as per the law of equity, it was based on the principles of conscience. And therefore, based on principles of conscience, it was made enforceable through the good offices of discretion. Judge was given discretion. Let us see what is discretion and what is conscience. Therefore, you will find discretion is that he may or may not. It is not mandatory for the judge. It is not compulsory for the judge to grant specific relief or to grant specific performance. Specific performance means performance in specie. What has been agreed, that is to be done, not the alternative consequences. Usually in courts you will find, if a person agrees to sell his land to other and then he refuses to give the sale deed, then other person may ask for two things. Either he may say, I want this land only. Or he may say that if you are not giving your land to me, okay, then give me compensation, give me damages, are the two consequences. In specie means I want the land only. I want that in specie, in that terms only, particular thing only. That is called specific performance. And therefore, in case of grant of such a specific performance, in earlier law, before 2018, there was the discretion granted to the court. This discretion now has been taken away by the amendment. Nevertheless, this being a new law, let us try to understand what was the earlier law and what is the today's law. Before 2018 amendment, there had been section 20 of this act. And that section 20, that heading was discretion and powers of the court. Above section 20, there was heading. Heading was the discretion and powers of the court. That discretion provided. The jurisdiction of the court was stated in section 20, subclause 1 of the old act. Section 20, into bracket 1 of the law before amendment provided for and conferred discretion on the judges. This discretion was that even though the plaintiff is entitled to claim such a specific performance, but the court may refuse such a performance. Court may ask him to claim damages or compensation, but not the thing in specie. That was the discretion. In this entire process, the judge was entitled to look into the hardship to the defendant. He was entitled to look into conduct of the parties. Judge was entitled to look into whether parties are coming with clean hands. Clean hands means with fair disclosures and telling all the truth before the court, disclosing all truth before the courts. And therefore, all these elements, judge was required to take into consideration. And then he was required to consider whether in the given case he is entitled to, or it is better to grant a specific relief or not. Specific relief, therefore, friends, was not as of right. Specific relief, therefore, was subjected to the discretion of the court and discretion of the judge. Looking into facts of each case, individual case, now the judge, he had a power to decide the case and to decree the suit for specific performance. The judge was not bound to grant in every case the specific relief. It was dependent on discretion. And this discretion, of course, was not subjective. It was not personal discretion. It was not a judge's discretion, but this discretion was judicious discretion. What is judicious discretion? Whenever in law we say judicious discretion, means there is absence of arbitrariness. There shall be no arbitrary discretion. And in the absence of such arbitrary discretion, such discretion is always subjected to correction in court of appeal by the appellate court. Means subjected to the judicial principles to be followed regarding discretion, court can or court may grant such a specific performance. Court was not bound in every case to grant specific relief by way of specific performance, was the consequence. Then, in this connection, As per section 20 sub clause 2 of this old law, section 20 sub clause 2 of the old law before 2018, court had power to refuse the performance. Even though all elements were present, judge was entitled to refuse the specific performance when the judge found based on the facts of the case. When the judge found based on the facts of the case, it is unfair to the defendant. It is unfair for the plaintiff to claim the specific performance. It is unfair to grant specific performance against the defendant. There will be undue hardship caused to the defendant. Then, even though all elements were present, the court was entitled, rather empowered, not to grant the specific performance. Therefore, in all these cases, reading together section 20 subclause 1 and section 20 subclause 2 of the law as it stood before 2018, the specific performance, it was a discretionary relief. It was not only based on law and the letters of the law, but was based on the conscience of the judge, discretion of the judge, dependent on facts of the case before him. That was the law then. However, to this section 20, subclause 2 thereof, there was an explanation. And that explanation was the provisions in respect of whether inadequacy of the consideration is ground for refusal of the performance. And it has been said that mere inadequacy is no ground for denial of the specific performance. Court may grant performance was the consequence, or court may refuse the performance in a given case was the consequence in respect of that. However, there was section 16, friends. That is also amended. Based on this, I'm going for how it is used in drafting. I know that today most of you are interested in to know some tips regarding drafting of these pleadings of plain and written statement. But before that, we must know all this background. And especially, section 16 was very vital of the old act. That is 1963 law before 2018 amendment. And that section 16 provided that personal bars to the relief. And consequence was any person as to who fails to ever and prove his readiness and willingness, he shall not be entitled to the specific performance. So, in all specific performance suits, till 2018, or all suits pending today in the courts, they were regulated by section 16, subclause E of the Act. And section 16, subclause E of the Act that provided the consequence in respect of readiness and willingness. Therefore, if a person intended or the plaintiff intended to have specific performance of the contract, then he must have to prove what he is ready and willing. And this is to be averred, this is to be stated, this is to be agitated in the plaint, and also to be proved before the court. Was the consequence in respect of the provisions that stood before this consequence. Now, based on this general discussion, let us come to drafting. Let us see how this plaint is drafted or written statement is drafted. Friends, some of you being the entrants in the course, some of you being the law students, I'll ask a question. Rather, that what is plaint and what is suit? What is suit? We're discussing not the plaint here, but we are discussing regarding the suits also. What is difference between plaint and a suit? And you as an entrant in the law course must know that plaint, when registered, becomes a suit. And what is pleading? As has been stated in order 6, order 7 and order 8, the plaint and written statement are pleadings. Therefore, there are only two forms of pleadings, plaint and written statement. And therefore, how to provide for drafting of plaint and written statement is our today's scope. What we shall have at the back of mind while drafting. As a lawyer, as a junior lawyer, what points you shall consider, what provisions you shall consider is the issue. And what is the change made in the law by 2018 amendment? In this behalf, friends, the Civil Procedure Code of 1908 provides for 4 parts to be considered while drafting of the plaint and return statement. In specific performance suits, these 4 parts are to be seen. First, sections. Second, orders in CPC. Third, appendix to the CPC. And fourth, the civil manual. Especially say in Maharashtra, that is the Bombay High Court Civil Manual. In each state, every High Court has to provide for its own civil manual. Means civil manual may be different for each of the state. Based on this, say for instance, in any state, the pleadings are to be provided, then such pleadings in respect of specific performance suits are as per the specimen provided in the appendix. Especially you'll find here in the appendix, there are forms provided, forms of the pleadings provided, forms of the plaints, important ingredients are provided. What are the minimal ingredients are to be found in the forms, and how we are guided in respect of specific performance suits, what minimum shall come, what are the minimum contents to be included, though these are, if they are absent, suit shall fail. And especially this is to be found in form number 47 and form number 48 in the appendix. In the appendix to the Civil Procedure Code, form number 47 and form number 48 provide for the guidelines for drafting of a plaint. What should be the basic contents of the plaint is to be found in form number 47 and 48. Especially as to pleadings, you have to follow those guidelines provided. Pleadings generally in order 6. Then as to suits, order 7, and as to return statement, as to order 8. Therefore, for pleading generally, for pleadings in the plaint, and for pleadings in the return statement, we have to follow the contents of order 6, order 7, and order 8. Of these various provisions, you will find especially in order 6, rule 3. Please note down, order 6, rule 3, it especially provides that while drafting the pleadings, they shall be in the form as provided in the appendix. So, for drafting of the plaint and the return statement, they shall be in the form provided in the appendix. It is further stated, sometimes there may not be appropriate form. Then in this rule 3, to order 6 it is provided, it shall be as nearly as possible. So the center point is the guidelines are provided only in the form numbers 47 and 48. And especially these form numbers 47 and 48, they are to be followed as it is or near about. Therefore, you read those forms and then you have to draft accordingly. However, as I have said, in each of the state, for every state, there is a civil manual by the High Court. So, for instance, in Maharashtra, there is the Bombay High Court Civil Manual. And the Bombay High Court Civil Manual has made a specific provision as to drafting of plaint and return statement. As to pleadings, there is a specific provision to be found, you please note, in Chapter 2 as to institution of suits. Chapter 2 of the Bombay High Court Civil Manual relates to the consequences provided as to institution of suits. Institution of suit is regulated by the provisions in Rule 8 into bracket D into 1. So, Rule 8 into bracket D into 1 provides for the provision as to institution of suits. So, orders, the forms, and the civil manual Rule 8 D provides for the same. However, in the civil manual also, it is specifically stated, as far as possible, you follow the forms in the appendix. In the run of the discussion, we're going to discuss this today these forms are not adequate for us. In the light of the amendment to this law, these forms are not adequate for us because there is a change made in this behalf. Therefore, if you are conducting an old suit which is instituted before 2018, law is different. And in respect of those suits which are instituted and which are based on 2018 amendment, they are different. Pleading is different, proving is different. Not only pleading, but proving is also different because of the amendment in section 16 of this act. Let us see what is the major change effected by virtue of the today's subject. By 2018, there is a major amendment effected in this law. Rather, I will say, entire law has been changed. Entire approach to the specific relief has been changed. My junior colleagues, they are advised by me that as far as possible, study well the amendment because you are to file claims and return statements based on this amendment, and you will be required to carry out to conduct the evidence based on these provisions of amendment. Regarding amendment, I will take only 5 minutes. This 2018 amendment to the Act of 1963 was thought necessary by the Indian Parliament because it was found that by virtue of 1963 legislation, as just now we have discussed section 16 and section 20 of the old Act, as it stood before 2018 amendment. What is the consequence? Consequence was discretion was given to the court. Even though all elements were present, but based on the facts, judge was justified in denying the specific performance. And what happened? In majority of cases, as has been found by the Parliament of India, that specific performance was rejected, was refused, and what was granted was alternative relief for compensation. It was found that during last few decades, there is a direct foreign investment in India. There is public participation projects coming in India. Now, there are major infrastructure projects coming in India. There is tremendous economic growth in India, and then this uncertainty in the law will be harmful to the progress. It was thought fit by the Parliament that this uncertainty, this discretion given to the judges is coming in the way of development of India. And therefore, they thought it fit to do away this hurdle of discretion. And by virtue of this amendment of 2018, which came into force on 1st October 2018, what they have done by one stroke, the discretion is taken away. That discretion is taken away, and that very heading under the old Act of 1963, which was above section 20, is now deleted. Now there is no discretion left with the courts. It is like a contract only, and there is no discretion to the civil court in respect of grant of specific performance of contracts. Therefore, based on these provisions, discretion has been taken away, and now by virtue of 2018 amendment, what has been provided that the specific performance is made a rule. In every case, specific performance must be granted unless the contract otherwise provides. There is provision made in the amendment of 2018, friends, for substituted performance. This was unknown to the Indian law heretofore. Up to this time, the Specific Relief Act was silent about such substituted performance. For the first time, such a substituted performance came to be provided, especially in respect of Section 20 amendment. So also, Section 20 subclause A capital provided that in respect of the infrastructure projects, there shall be no injunction to be granted. Court's powers were restricted in respect of infrastructure. Let me tell you a few things before we come to the last aspect. Second aspect is as to substituted performance. Regarding substituted performance, what happened was previously, if there was agreement to construct a bungalow or agreement to construct a building, then other party can claim that that building shall be constructed, that specific performance shall be done. However, by virtue of this amendment, what is provided is very different. There is a major change effected by virtue of the provisions of this substituted performance in section 20. Section 20 now provides that if there is a contract and defendant has broken the contract, he has not honored the contract, then plaintiff has to give, the rightful party has to give 6 months notice to the other party. After giving 6 months notice to the other party then can do the work. The question comes to an end. If he is not doing it, then the rightful party can get the work done at his own cost, and then will file a suit against the wrongdoer, against the defendant for recovery of cost, damages, compensation, etc. And therefore, there is alternative remedy provided by virtue of this provision in this law. Based on this now, friends, let us come to what difference is made as to pleadings today. As we have said, law was different before 1st October 2018 and law is different after 1st October 2018. Let us see now, because of this amendment in the law, what precaution as a student of law you shall take and I shall take. First, there is need to amend the Appendix A of the CPC. Appendix A must be amended. New forms are provided. New forms are not provided so far. Secondly, civil manual must be amended. Thirdly, there is a provision made in section 16 that plaintiff must aver and prove. Now, the word aver has been deleted and it is only plaintiff has to prove why he is entitled to specific performance. The difficulty I will explain to you. What was the earlier law? In section 16 it was stated plaintiff must aver, he must state and then prove. By virtue of amendment in section 16, by 2018 amendment, what has been stated? The plaintiff, what he has to do? Plaintiff has to prove only he did not make the averment. As a student of law, I fail to understand the background of this provision, the import of this provision, because how without pleading we can prove? In the courts of law, you find that whenever any party intends to lead the evidence, then other party objects that this is not pleaded. If you are not pleaded the averment, then how you can prove the same? This lacuna is left, and as a student of law, as a lawyer, I apprehend there will be the series of cases hereafter so as to provide as to this concept of the averment in this behalf. Last point I will agitate. Then we come to the case law and elements of pleadings. Especially you will find in India, the agriculturist, illiterate agriculturist, rural people, the masses, they don't understand the technicalities of law. Sometimes for some amount, say loan amount, etc., they go to the money lenders or other people in the village and they enter into agreement to sell. Now, by virtue of this, the power of the court to consider the background thereof is taken away. Discretion of the court, that subjective element of the judge to look into the facts is taken away. In every case now, judge must grant specific performance. Great injustice will be caused to the Indian peasantry or citizenry, especially from rural area. Law will be required to be amended by the parliament, or there will be a plethora of the judgment from the superior courts to correct these consequences. Friends, based on this, let us come to the next point, and that is elements of pleadings and elements as to pleadings and drafting of the pleadings. Someone now I have seen that when I will come to this concept of the pleadings, while drafting pleadings, the form of the plaint or the written statement, let us see what are the aspects necessary. There are about 15 to 20 points to be highlighted, and there are some cases to be discussed within the remaining period. First, so as to claim specific performance, there must be express and existence of valid contract. Unless there is a contract, there can be no specific performance. And contract, which contract? There shall be a concluded contract. Unless there is a concluded contract, there can be no enforcement of such a contract by virtue of specific performance. There has been a case decided by the Supreme Court of India. You please take down Vimlesh Kumari Kulasreshta versus Sambhaji Rao, reported in 2008, volume number 2, SCC, page number 127. In that case, Supreme Court has specifically and categorically stated whenever plaintiff comes in the court, he must first plead in his plaint. What he must plead? That there is a concluded contract. If in your plaint there is no pleading to the effect that there is a concluded contract, then very well you can, in such a case, you can not succeed in the case. So what is necessary? There shall be a concluded complete contract. There must be existence of such a contract. If there is no concluded contract, then specific performance cannot be claimed is the ratio of the judgment of the apex court. Then we go to the second issue. That is the second point to be considered for drafting, and that is the theory of oral agreement. In respect of oral agreement, whether specific performance of oral agreement can be made. Every now and then we come across, sometimes there are written contracts, sometimes there are written agreements, sometimes there are oral also. Issue arises whether in respect of oral agreement, can there be a specific performance? In this consequence, Supreme Court has not stated that there always shall be a written contract. There can be oral agreement also, and of oral agreement also, there can be a specific performance. Therefore, in the first case, court said there must be a contract. In this second case, the Supreme Court has held that there can be a specific performance also. There can be a specific performance also of oral agreement. So, what is the distinction between first and the second point? First point we have said, in case of Vimlesh Kumari Kulasreshta versus Sambhaji Rao, that there must be a contract. What is second point? There must be a contract, but contract may be written contract or oral contract, and has been held by the Supreme Court that in the case of Varghese versus Joseph Ale, Varghese versus Joseph Ale, reported in 1996, BGLS SOP, page number 285. In this case, the Supreme Court said even there can be specific performance of oral agreement. So friends, someone is stating that I shall be little slow for this case law. I will. So first two cases are to be discussed in a comparative manner. First case of Vimlesh Kumari Kulasreshta versus Sambhaji Rao says that there must be a concluded contract. So in our every pleading in the plaint, we shall state that there is a concluded contract. If not, defendant in his written statement will make a pleading that there is no concluded contract and suit may fail. Therefore, every lawyer drafting must make a specific mention that there is a concluded contract. If there is an oral contract, what will happen? In case of oral contract, it has been held by the Supreme Court that even of oral contract, there can be a specific performance, as has been observed by the apex court in the case of Varghese versus Joseph Ale, as I have stated the citation. But the Supreme Court has put a rider. If it is a written contract, then the document itself will be the proof. In case of oral contract, the apex court has stated that there is a heavy burden put on the shoulders of the plaintiff to prove oral agreement. Existence of oral agreement are the first 2 points. This is the beginning. Therefore, whenever we take anything for drafting of a plaint or a written statement, what we shall have to back up our mind that there is a concluded contract. Terms of the concluded contract. There is a completed contract. And if we are not stating in the plaint, defendant, if you are a lawyer for the defendant, you shall raise the defense that there is no concluded contract. And therefore, if there is no concluded contract, no specific performance suit shall fail. Therefore, such a small thing will result into a fatal consequence. If there is a oral agreement, then naturally duty will be on the shoulders of the plaintiff to prove the existence of the oral agreement. Is the consequence in respect of the case of Verghese versus Joseph Ale as decided by the apex court. We come to the next consequence, friends. Within what period suit shall be instituted? While drafting of a plaint, we shall keep in mind especially the junior lawyers shall keep in mind what shall be the period, and it is stated that suit shall be instituted within a reasonable period. Suit has to be instituted within a reasonable period. What is reasonable is not defined. It is a question of fact. What is a reasonable period is dependent on facts of each case. There is no fixed period. There is no fixed period. But what a reasonable man, guided by principles, shall be instituting a suit by going to the court shall be the period. That is a reasonable period. And therefore, within reasonable period, suit shall be instituted. This has been so laid in the ratio of the Supreme Court in the case of Chanda Rani versus Kamal Rani. In case of Chanda Rani versus Kamal Rani, 1993, volume number 1, SCC, page number 519, Supreme Court said that suit to be instituted within a reasonable time. What is reasonable, friend, is a question of fact dependent on facts of a particular case and differs from case to case. Then we come to the fourth element. Fourth point we shall have back of mind, and that is whether time is essence of contract. In respect of such a contract to be performed and specific performance is to be claimed, whether time is essence of the contract or not. And it is stated that usually in India, in respect of contracts of immovable property, time is not essence of the contract. Generally speaking, time is not essence of the contract. It depends on the terms of the contract and specific terms of the contract. Otherwise, the question of fact and the surrounding circumstances are to be taken into consideration by the court. In the same case of Chanda Rani versus Kamal Rani, as the citation we have stated, 1993, volume number 1, SCC, page number 519, the time shall not be treated as essence of contract unless in that particular case it has been specifically pleaded. Otherwise, that is not essence of contract. Next, then we come to fifth element. Fifth element is to what extent conduct of the parties is relevant. To what extent conduct of the parties is relevant, and it is provided that conduct of the party before the amendment, conduct of the parties for the pending suits is very much relevant. Conduct of the plaintiff as well as the defendant is relevant. Which conduct? Today's conduct? No. Past, present, till decree of the suit. All facts and the behavior, rather conduct of the parties shall be considered by the court from the date of the contract, filing of the suit, during the pendency of the suit till decree of the suits. All such conduct of the plaintiff and the defendant becomes relevant in such suits. Especially, it is always stated, and we always argue in the courts. You will find whenever you go to the court as a junior lawyer with your senior, then your senior will vehemently argue that this person has not came with clean hands. Why for? Why for clean hands? Because his conduct is relevant. He must act in an honest manner. He must disclose all the facts. And there is an occasion for the Supreme Court whether really conduct of the plaintiff and conduct of the defendant is relevant in such civil cases. In criminal cases, law is different and has been observed by the Supreme Court in the case of G. Jayasri versus Bhagwan Das. In case of G. Jayasri versus Bhagwan Das, reported in AIR 2009, Supreme Court, page number 1749, the Supreme Court observed that parties to claim such a relief shall come with clean hands. They must disclose all the facts. There shall be no concealment of the facts. And hence, while giving such a notice, while drafting a complaint or while drafting a return statement, you as a lawyer ask your client to disclose all the facts. His conduct is very much relevant in such proceedings. So conclude a contract, maybe oral contract, then within reasonable time, whether time is essence of contract or not, and then conduct of the parties is relevant in this behalf. Especially sometimes, almost in those cases wherein there was a less consideration, we, the lawyers, raise a point in our return statement. We, the lawyers, raise our point in the return statement that there is inadequacy of the consideration. There is inadequacy of the consideration, means price is not proper. Say, for instance, they will say that price is 1 crore rupees, while the plaintiff has paid me only 50 lakhs rupees. Whether inadequacy of the consideration or lesser payment, less price is a ground or not. And this issue again was before the Supreme Court, whether inadequacy is a ground to refuse the performance. What we have said just now, you must be remembering. There is a provision made in the earlier law before amendment that mere inadequacy is no ground to refuse the specific performance. Inadequacy may be ground, but is not the ground only, a mere ground. Therefore, issue today arises as to whether inadequacy of the consideration, less consideration, improper consideration is a ground to refuse the specific performance. And the issue had been to the Supreme Court. This issue had been to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court, in the same case of Chanda Rani versus Kamal Rani, decided that, held that mere inadequacy of the consideration is no ground. Merely because price is less, comparative price is less, as compared to other properties, other transactions, this gentleman has been paid less, is no ground to refuse and to deny the specific performance of such suits. Is the consequence in respect of the specific performance suits. There was a very interesting case before the Supreme Court. In that interesting case before the Supreme Court, the defendant very honestly fought the case. He argued the case and then stated that, look here, how less price is paid to me, and therefore there shall be no specific performance. Supreme Court, in that exceptional case, held in some cases, in few cases, there can be increase in the price. What was not agreed between the parties, Supreme Court substituted the same. Please try to understand. In that case, it was agreed before the parties that they shall pay a certain amount to the plaintiff, as the case we have discussed. And then it was argued before the Supreme Court, price offered in the contract is much less than the contract price, is the market price, the ready reckoner price, etc. The Supreme Court said to the plaintiff, look here, in this particular case, we will grant you specific performance to increase the price. Generally, parties to decide the price. Supreme Court is not to decide the price. However, if it is inequitable, how it is found, it is improper, Supreme Court in this case held that price should be increased. Then only specific performance may be granted. Therefore, court has got such a power in such case to interfere and to decide the cases. Especially now, we come to the next aspect. Especially in our state of Maharashtra, for some transactions, permissions are required. Say, for instance, if it is a land by virtue of the Maharashtra agricultural land and tenancy law, the tenant becomes the owner. Then for transfer of such land, permission is required under section 43 of this law. If tenant has become the purchaser, statutory purchaser, he is now willing to sell his land to the plaintiff, and he agrees to sell. Now it is subjected to collector's permission. Whether if any contract is to be completed subject to permission from some government authority, revenue authority, etc., then whether specific performance can be claimed or not. Please try to understand. If it is a simple contract, A agrees to sell his land to B. That is the case so far we discussed. Now their case is different. Now here A agrees to sell his land to B, but for such a transaction, for such a sale, permission from the collector is necessary, say for instance, permission from the government of Maharashtra is necessary for instance, then whether specific performance can be granted or not, and was the question before the Supreme Court. In the case of Gundaraj Satwaji Shinde versus Ramchandra Bhikaji Joshi. Gundaraj Satwaji Shinde versus Ramchandra Bhikaji Joshi, reported in 1979, Maharashtra Law Journal, Supreme Court, page number 283. In this case, same issue was there. In this Shinde versus Joshi's case, issue was before the apex court, before the Supreme Court, if any contract provides for performance subject to permission, whether court can grant a specific performance or not. And it has been stated in this judgment, which is reported on page number 283, that the court is empowered, is entitled to grant specific performance. That is not bar. Permission is not bar. Court may ask for the party to go to the collector and ask for the permission, subject to which there can be specific performance granted. Then comes the next element, friends. Readiness and willingness. Every now and then, we argue before the courts. You must have heard lawyers vehemently arguing before the courts that plaintiff is ready and willing. Defendant says that plaintiff was not ready and willing. What is meaning of the term ready and willing, friends? Why the two words have been used? Readiness and willingness. What is readiness? Apparently, we find the same consequence. What is the same consequence? Ready and willing. I am ready, I am willing. What is the difference? And the Supreme Court has explained this difference in case that we will discuss. But it has been held the term readiness, the word readiness relates to economic ability and conditions regarding his financial conditions, while willingness relates to the conduct of the parties. That is his willingness. I am willing. I have got the money and I am willing. I am ready and I am willing. I have got the money. That is readiness. But I am not willing. And therefore, these two phrases are to be understood with reference to one relates to intention, other relates to my pocket or my ability. Now, this issue has been explained by the Supreme Court in all details in a celebrated case of J.P. Builders and another, J.P. Builders and another versus Ramdas Rao and others. J.P. Builders and another versus Ramdas Rao and another. 2011, volume number 1, SCC, page number 429. And secondly, the case was before the Supreme Court, Dheeraj Developers versus Om Prakash Gupta. Dheeraj Developers versus Om Prakash Gupta, AIR 2016, Supreme Court, page number 1438. In these two cases, the Honorable Supreme Court has very succinctly, specifically, expressly distinguished between readiness and willingness. How I shall have economic ability and how I shall be willing to perform my part. The two consequences. Especially in respect of this, my readiness and my willingness is to be judged at what point of time. Friends, try to understand. To claim specific performance, I must be ready. To claim specific performance, I must be willing. But issue is that in respect of my readiness and willingness, from what point of time I shall be ready and willing? From what point of time I shall be ready and willing? And have been observed by the Supreme Court that this readiness and willingness is a continuous process. Only at the end I will say I am ready and willing is not sufficient. Especially, friends, Mr. Munde.
I'm sorry to interrupt, sir. The one who is whose mic is on, please switch off your mic because I'm not able to find who is the one who has unmuted himself.
Mr. Mahesh Munde, please unmute yourself. So next issue was as to readiness and willingness. And in the case before the apex court, the case was N.P. Thirunangam versus Dr. R. Jagan Mohan Rao, reported in 1995, volume number 5, SCC, page number 115. Again, I will repeat, N.P. Thirurangam versus Dr. R. Jagan Mohan Rao, reported in 1995, volume number 5, SCC, page number 115. That is, the readiness and willingness is to be judged, is to be reckoned from the date of the execution till the execution of a decree. See the scope of this readiness and willingness. You must come with clean hands, no doubt. You must be ready and you must also be willing, intending to perform your part from execution of the agreement till its actual execution of a decree. If at any time the court finds that you are not ready and willing to perform your part, specific performance may be refused by the court. Then, secondly, issue is in this connection whether such a person who intends to claim specific performance, whether he shall plead and prove that he has got money. If, say, for instance, plaintiff enters into agreement with the defendant to buy his land for, say, 1 crore rupees, and then defendant refuses to do the same. Now, plaintiff shall prove. What he shall prove? Plaintiff shall prove that he is ready to pay 1 crore rupees. Is it sufficient only to say, yes, I have got 1 crore rupees, I will do it? Or whether it is necessary to prove that he has 1 crore rupees? Was the question. Are you getting me correctly? Whether factum or fact of money with him, availability of money with him is to be proved or not to be proved. Or it is only by paper I am saying, I have got money. I have got sufficient money. Is it duty on the plaintiff to state so in the plaint or not? If not stated, you as a defendant's lawyer shall attack him saying that he has no money available with him. He is not ready and not willing. His suit may be defeated on this account. And therefore, readiness and willingness must be pleaded and must be proved as per the old law in this behalf. There was a case before the Supreme Court, and that was the case of, there was a case before the apex court, and was the case of Vijay Kumar versus Om Prakash. In this case of Vijay Kumar versus Om Prakash, 2018, DGLS, Supreme Court 1007. It has been said and held by the apex court, capacity to pay must be pleaded and proved. Simply saying, yeah, that I am ready to do my part, I am ready to pay is not sufficient. It must be stated in this case. It must be stated in this case. What must be stated? You must plead in the plaint that you have got money and you are ready to pay the money. Otherwise, very wise defendant and his lawyer will attack on this point and suit may fail because of this Vijay Kumar's decision by the Supreme Court. Small things are fatal. If you don't say something in the plaint, will be sufficient to dismissal of the plaint or rejection of the plaint. Then essentials element involved, especially in the plaint, what actually you shall write, what actually you shall consider. There is a guideline given by the Supreme Court. Friends, my entire discussion with you, my entire dialogue with you has been narrated in one judgment by the Supreme Court. If you read one judgment of the Supreme Court, entire law will be clear to you. And that is the judgment of Kamal Kumar. Please take down his very important judgment. This is rather the gist of our today's discussion. That is the judgment of Kamal Kumar versus Prem Lata Joshi. Kamal Kumar versus Prem Lata Joshi, reported in 2019 DGLS, 2019 DGLS, Supreme Court, page number 17. And court said, court held, that is a guideline for lawyers, budding lawyers, and law students. You must read this judgment. And it is said that there are 5 factors which are necessary while drafting a plaint or while attacking a plaint. Either while drafting a plaint or while attacking the plaint in the written statement, you must consider 5 factors. First, there must be a concluded contract. Whether there is a concluded contract or not, you must state. And then whether there is any writing or whether there is an oral contract. Whether part has been performed and extent of the performance of the part under the contract. Whether it is equitable and whether there is hardship is likely to be caused. And whether there is any other alternative remedy or relief available to you or not is the consequence to be found in this judgment of the Supreme Court. Therefore, Supreme Court has very clearly stated that while granting specific performance, you must prove all these things. There is one more aspect. Sometimes you'll find there are co-owners in the property. And say the co-owners of the property, one co-owners say that there are 4 co-owners and only one co-owner has agreed to sell the property. Or whether there are 2 co-owners and one of them intends to have the specific performance. Whether there can be a specific performance claim or not. And there are 2 methods thereof. If there are 2 co-owners, and they agree to sell their property, then if one of them is not agreeable, other is agreeable, suit can be instituted against him. However, if any property there is minor's share is involved, lawyer shall take maximum precautions. In case of minor having his property, then we know, especially for minor's property, everyone knows that court permission is necessary. If court permission is necessary for sale of a minor's property and by agreement to sell, somebody on behalf of the minor agrees with you to sell the property, can you ask for the specific performance of minor's agreement or not? And it is found, and there is a series of judgments of the court that in respect of minor's share, there shall be no specific performance granted by the court, because for such a transaction, prior permission from the court is necessary. Without permission, there can be no agreement possible. If no agreement, no specific performance. Then comes the next aspect, that sometimes you'll find as a lawyer, when you enter into the court, that there are sometimes a registered agreement to sell and unregistered agreement to sell. Issue sometimes arises in respect of unregistered agreement to sell, whether there can be specific performance claimed or not. And was the very issue, core issue before the Supreme Court. Because we know, especially in villages, especially in rural areas, especially in respect of agricultural lands, there are unregistered agreements. In respect of unregistered agreement, whether there can be specific performance claimed or not. And Supreme Court provided for a guideline in this behalf in the year 2010. And that is the celebrated case of the Supreme Court, S. Kaladevi versus V.R. Somasundaram. S. Kaladevi versus V.R. Somasundaram, reported in AIR 2010, Supreme Court, page number 1654. I'll repeat again. S. Kaladevi versus V.R. Somasundaram, reported in AIR 2010, Supreme Court, page number 1654. Especially in this case, issue was before the apex court that whether there can be specific performance of unregistered agreement to sell or not. And in this case has been held by the Honorable Supreme Court that even in respect of unregistered agreement to sell, there can be a specific performance permissible. Especially in this entire process before amendment, point was relating to conduct of the parties. And regarding conduct of the parties, Supreme Court has delivered numerous judgments, as just now we have discussed. But there is a very interesting judgment you have to read, that is H.P. Parajan versus Dasgupta. Please write H.P. Parajan versus Dasgupta, reported in AIR 2006, Supreme Court, page number 1144. AIR 2006, Supreme Court, page number 1144. In this case, Supreme Court has very categorically stated how conduct of the party is relevant before the court, because everyone shall come with clean hands and his behavior is to be looked into by the court. These are some of the points to be taken into consideration in respect of the pending suits. In respect of the pending suits, in respect of the suits which are based on contracts concluded before 2018. Friends, now entirely new law came for the young lawyers, budding lawyers. You as a student of law, when you find that there is any contract after 2018 or you have to file a suit after 2018, then you have to modify the law in this behalf. Especially then, those issues are irrelevant. Which issues? Conduct of the parties not to be considered. Conduct of the parties has no evidence, has no relevance now, because it is a technical justice which is contemplated by the amendment of 2018. By virtue of amendment of 2018, that element of discretion or subjectivity in the case has been taken away from the courts. Courts and judges' hands, they are bound by that. They are bound by the letters of law. If it is proved, they must grant specific performance. They cannot deny the specific. Especially in section 16, very major amendment has been added, as well as explanation below section 16. Previously, what was stated, friends? Whenever I were to draft a plaint, I have to write that I am ready and willing to perform my part. I have to aver, and then when evidence comes to that level, I have to prove before the court. Now, in this law, it is stated that word averment is taken away. Word averment is deleted, and it is said, I must prove that I am ready and willing to perform my part. However, it is very difficult. If I do not plead, if I do not state in my pleadings, how I can prove in the courts? And this is the difficulty. Rather, according to me, is a lacuna in the amended act. In short, to conclude today's session, I will say, as my time is nearing completion. So, to conclude, I will say that the discussion in respect of suits instituted before 1st October 2018 is different, and suits to be instituted after 2018 is different. Depending on this aspect of technicalities of the law, you have to prepare your pleadings subjected to sections, subjected to the orders, subjected to the specimen provided in the appendix, and also subjected to Rule 8, Sub-Rule D, Sub-Rule 1 of the Civil Manual of the Bombay High Court, or in each of the state High Court's manual. Friends, this is a very short summary because the subject is very vast, and this is a short summary in respect of the provisions relating to the specific relief, the earlier law of 1877, the then law of 1963, amendment of 2018, and the consequence of the amendment of 2018, pending suits, and the suits instituted after 2018. Friends, with this, I conclude with the permission of the organizers, and I'll be very happy to answer your queries based on this dialogue and discussion. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir. Participants are requested to unmute themselves if they have any queries, because no question is appearing in the chat box, neither it is appearing in the comment box on YouTube. I think participants don't have any question. Sir, there is one question.
Yes, please. Yes, please.
Sir, one participant is asking to provide them with a dummy case draft so that they will be able to draft a case.
Yeah, I will give it. I will send on your mail so that you can send them within next 2 days time. Tomorrow, friends, tomorrow I will give summary of my today's submissions, statements, dialogue, and especially the case law. I'll give about 3-4 pages summary. I will send to Ananga madam on her email so that during your course of discussion for next 3 days, you'll have a PDF material therefore.
We would be obliged, sir.
Yes,
Thank you
very
so
much.
much, sir. We mention our deep sense of gratitude to Advocate Avar, sir, for commendably addressing the participants on specific performance suits. I also thank attendees on WebEx and YouTube for evincing interest in today's session. Before concluding the session, I would like to request all the registered participants to remain present tomorrow at the same time, where Advocate Priyank Upadhyay from Delhi will be addressing on drafting of civil applications. Thank you so much, one and all. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Ashni. Thank you for attending.